The Gold Bug, Part 2, by Edgar Allan Poe. Beetle on a String. Legrand grasped my hand nervously. His face was pale, and his deep-set eyes seemed unusually bright, even glaring. Seeing his ghastly appearance, I shared Jupiter's concern about his health, but when I asked about it, Legrand brushed aside my questions. Not knowing what else to say, I asked if he had gotten the beetle back yet from Lieutenant Gray. "Oh, yes," he replied, and his face reddened. "I got it from him the next morning. Nothing will tempt me to part with the scarab ever again." "Do you know that Jupiter's quite right about it?" "How do you mean?" I asked, alarmed. "In saying it's real gold." He said this in such a serious tone that I was truly shocked. "This bug will make my fortune," he continued mysteriously, smiling in triumph. "It will restore my family possessions. Is it any wonder that I prize it? Since fortune has seen fit to give it to me, I must use it properly, and then I shall find the gold, for the gold bug is the key to it." At this Legrand rose, took the beetle from the glass case, and brought it to me. It was indeed a beautiful scarab, and, at that time, of a variety unknown to naturalists. Of course, it was a great prize from a scientific point of view. There were 2 round black spots near one end of the back, and a long black spot near the other end, just as he had described. The scales were hard and glossy, with all the appearance of polished gold. The weight of the insect was remarkable, too. And taking all things into consideration, I could hardly blame Jupiter for believing it was solid gold. But what was I to make of Legrand's agreeing with him? Surely even an amateur scientist would know better. "I sent for you," Legrand began dramatically in a strange booming voice, "to have your advice concerning fate and the bug, and—" "My dear Legrand," I interrupted, "you are certainly ill, and had better go to bed. I will stay with you a few days until you get over this. You are feverish and—" "Feel my pulse," he said, now back to his usual voice. I felt his pulse and, to tell the truth, found not the slightest indication of fever. "But you may be ill, and yet have no fever. First, go to bed, then—" "You are mistaken," he broke in. "I am as well as I can be under the circumstances. It is only the excitement which I feel. If you really want to help me, you will share this excitement." "And how can I do that?" "Very easily. Jupiter and I are going on an expedition into the hills on the mainland. We shall need help. You are the only one we can trust. It doesn't matter whether we succeed or fail. Either way, my excitement will be satisfied and I will rest easy." "I would do anything to help you," I replied. "But do you mean to say that this infernal beetle has something to do with your expedition into the hills?" "It has." "Then, Legrand, I cannot become a party to such an absurd expedition." "But it will only be for one night," he protested. "We shall start immediately, and be back by sunrise." "And you will promise me, upon your honor, that when this madness of yours is over and the bug business settled, you will then return to your home and follow my advice until you recover?" Yes, I promise. Now let's be off. We have no time to lose." With a heavy heart, I accompanied my friend. We started at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Legrand, Jupiter, the dog, and myself. Jupiter insisted on carrying the scythe and the spades, more because he feared to trust Legrand with them than out of any zeal for hard work. I carried a couple of lanterns, while Legrand contented himself with carrying the scarab, which was attached to the end of a long length of cord. He twirled it to and fro as he walked, with the air of a sorcerer. I thought this was surely evidence of his loss of sanity, and I was terribly upset. But I didn't want to disturb his mind any more than it already was, so I reluctantly continued along in silence. We crossed the creek separating Sullivan's Island from the mainland in a small boat. Once ashore, we started climbing the high grounds, going in a northwesterly direction through a desolate stretch of countryside. No trace of a human step was to be seen. Legrand led the way, pausing only here and there to check out certain landmarks. After about 2 hours, when the sun was just setting, we entered an even drearier landscape. This was a flat region near the top of a heavily wooded hill. The thickly overgrown bramble bushes grew in between huge rocks on the hill. We had climbed onto a sort of natural platform, with Jupiter cutting our way through with the scythe, until we came to an enormously tall tulip tree, surrounded by 8 or 10 short oaks. Never did I see so tall a tree, nor one so beautiful in its foliage and form, in the wide spread of its branches, and in the general majesty of its appearance. Legrand turned to Jupiter. "Jupe, do you think you can climb it?" he asked. The old man seemed a little staggered by the question. He walked slowly around the thick trunk and examined it closely. "Yes, Mr. Will, I can climb any tree I ever saw in my life." "Then up with you, and soon as possible. It will soon be too dark to see what we must see." "How far up must I go?" "Get up the main trunk first, and then I will tell you what to do. Here, wait. Take the beetle with you." "The bug, Mr. Will? The gold bug? What must I take that thing for?" "Jupe, if you are afraid, a great big fellow like you, to carry a harmless little dead beetle, why then you can hold it by this string. But if you do not take it up with you in some way, I shall have to break your head with this shovel." "I was just joking," exclaimed Jupiter. "What do I care about an old bug?" And saying this, he cautiously took hold of the end of the string, and keeping the insect as far from his body as possible, started up the tree. Young tulip trees have peculiarly smooth trunks. They often grow to a great height before their branches develop. At a riper age, the bark becomes gnarled and uneven, and many short limbs branch off from the main trunk. Thus, it was not really difficult for Jupiter to get a footing, since the trunk, tall as it was a natural ladder. Jupiter reached the first large branch, some 60 or 70 feet from the ground, in short order. Wriggling himself into the fork of the branch and the trunk, he seemed to consider his mission accomplished. "What now, Mr. Will?" he called down. "Follow up the largest branch, the one on this side," called back Legrand. Jupiter obeyed him promptly, and apparently with little trouble. He climbed higher and higher until we could no longer see his squat figure through the thick foliage surrounding him. Presently we heard his voice. "How much further?" he called down. "How high are you?" asked Legrand. "I can see the sky through the top." "Never mind the sky," called back Legrand. "Listen carefully. Look down the trunk. Count the branches below you on this side. How many are there?" "1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 big ones on this side." "Then go one branch higher." In a few minutes Jupiter's voice was heard again, announcing that he was now on the 7th branch. "Now, Jupe," called Legrand excitedly, "I want you to work your way out upon that branch as far as you can. If you could see anything strange, let me know." By this time I was certain of my poor friend's insanity, and I became anxious about getting him home. "Most out to the end now." Jupiter's distant voice interrupted my thoughts. "Out to the end!" screamed Legrand. "Are you out to the end yet?" "Soon be out to the end, Mr. Will." "Oh, Lord God Almighty! What is this here on the tree?" "Well, what is it?" shouted back Legrand, suddenly seeming quite delighted. "Why, 'tain't nothing but a skull. Somebody left his head up in the tree, that's all, and the crows gobbled off every bit of meat." "A skull, you say? Now tell me, how is it fastened to the branch? What holds it on?" "Just a minute now. Let me look. Why, that's very strange. There's a big nail in the skull holding it onto the tree." "Now, Jupiter, can you hear me? Do exactly as I tell you." "Yes, Mr. Will." "Pay attention, then. Find the left eye of the skull. Do you know your right hand from your left?" "Yes, it's my left hand I chop wood with." "To be sure, you are left-handed, and your left eye is on the same side as your left hand. Now find the left eye of that skull." There was a long pause. "Have you found it yet?" called Legrand, anxiously. "Is the left eye of the skull on the same side as the left hand of the skull?" "'Cause the skull ain't got a hand at all." "Never mind. Here's the left eye. Now what do I do with it?" "Drop the beetle through it. Let it drop down as far as the string will reach. But don't let go of the string until I tell you." "All done, Mr. Will. It was mighty easy putting the bug through the hole. Watch out for him below." As Jupiter spoke, the beetle became visible at the end of the string. It hung quite clear of any branches and glistened like a glob of polished gold in the last rays of the setting sun. "All right, Jupiter, let it fall," shouted Legrand carefully now. The insect fell like a heavy weight at our feet. Legrand immediately drove a peg into the ground precisely at the spot where the beetle fell. "Well done, Jupiter. You can come down now." While the old man was clambering down, Legrand took a tape measure from his pocket. Fastening one end of it to the tree trunk on the side nearest the peg, he unrolled it until it reached the peg. Then he unrolled it farther in the same direction, continuing in a straight line 50 feet past the peg. There he drove a second peg into the ground, using this second peg as a center, and the tape measure as a compass, he scratched a circle about 4 feet in diameter in the dirt. Then Legrand picked up one of the spades and, giving the others to Jupiter and to me, begged us to dig inside the circle as quickly as possible. To tell the truth, I did not particularly enjoy digging at any time, and at that moment I would have preferred to refuse. Night was coming on. It had been a long day for me. I was already quite tired from the long climb, and I did not look forward to the hike back in pitch darkness. But I saw no way out, and I was afraid it would disturb my poor friend's mental balance if I refused. It seemed to me that Legrand, in his illness, was believing some southern superstitions about buried money, and his fantasy had probably been fed by finding the scarab, or perhaps by Jupiter's idea that it was a bug of real gold. A mind on the brink of insanity would easily be led by such suggestions. I recalled the poor fellow's speech about the beetles being the key to his fortune. I was sadly disturbed about his condition, but I decided that the best thing would be to dig willingly. I would do what I could to hasten the moment when we could convince Legrand, by finding nothing, that his hopes were in vain. We lit lanterns and fell to work with a zeal worthy of a more sensible project. We dug steadily, talking little. The only sounds were the thuds of the earth as it dropped from our shovels, and the yelpings of the dog, who took great interest in our activity. After about 2 hours we had reached a depth of 5 feet, but there was no sign of any treasure. I began to hope that the game was over. Legrand, however, evidently much distressed, insisted that we enlarge the circumference of the circle and dig some more. Still nothing appeared. Legrand finally climbed out of the pit, with the bitterest disappointment on his face. I gladly followed him. Jupiter began to gather up the tools with Wolf at our heels. We silently turned toward home. We had taken no more than a dozen steps in this direction when, with a loud oath, Legrand turned on Jupiter and seized him by the collar. "You scoundrel!" he hissed from between his clenched teeth. "You infernal villain! Speak, I tell you! Tell me this instant! Which is your left eye?" The astonished fellow opened his eyes and mouth to the fullest, dropped the spades, and trembled on shaky knees. "Oh, Mr. Will, ain't this here my left eye?" stammered the terrified Jupiter, placing his hand upon his right eye. "I thought so! I knew it!" exclaimed Legrand, letting Jupiter go and jumping about in excitement. "Come, we must go back. There's no time to lose." And he again led the way to the tulip tree. "Jupiter, come here," he ordered when he reached the tree. Was the skull nailed to the branch with the face outward, or with the face toward the tree? "The face was out, Mr. Will." "Well then," said Legrand, touching each of Jupiter's eyes, "was it this eye, or that through which you dropped the beetle?" "It was this eye, the left one, just as you told me." And here Jupiter pointed to his right eye. "Good. You must try it again." Now I thought I saw some method to my friend's madness. He took the peg marking the spot where the beetle first fell and moved it about 3 inches to the west. Then he fastened the tape measure to the tree trunk and unrolled it again to the peg. As before, he continued it in a straight line to the distance of 50 feet and drove in the second peg. This new spot was several yards away from the point at which we had been digging before. Here we marked a new circle and again began to dig. I was dreadfully weary. But strangely, I no longer felt any distaste for the work. I had become most interested, even I must admit excited. I now dug eagerly, and found myself looking expectantly for the imagined treasure. When we had been at work perhaps an hour and a half, Wolf suddenly leaped into the hole, tearing up the ground frantically with his claws. In a few seconds he had uncovered a mass of human bones, forming 2 skeletons. 1 or 2 strokes of a spade revealed the blade of a large Spanish knife, and, as we dug further, 3 or 4 loose pieces of gold coins came to light. At the sight of these, Jupiter could scarcely contain his joy. Legrand, however, still looked extremely disappointed. "Come on," he urged us. "Keep digging." The words were hardly out of his mouth when the toe of my boot got caught in something. I stumbled and fell forward into the loose earth. Scrambling to my feet, I brushed myself off and looked down to see what I had stumbled against. It was a large iron ring, half buried, rusty, and encrusted with earth.